The Sixers showed their flaws for the first time this season on a 3-game losing streak out west. The Flyers' season is still on halt due to that virus we all know too well. And the Phillies, there's some good news there. Pitchers and catchers reported this week. All that coming to you on Sports Talk Philadelphia. Hi everyone, welcome to Sports Talk Philadelphia. I'm your host today, Cale Flieger. I'm joined by my regular panel, Tyler Small. How are you today?
Good, how you doing?
I have Will Shannon to my right, and I also have Aiden Tiksinski. How are you today?
Good.
So last time we talked, the Sixers were 4.5-game lead in the Eastern Conference. We all know they had a very hard schedule going on a 3-game road trip out west. They played the Suns, they played the Portland Trail Blazers, and they also played the Jazz, which we all know they're top seeds in the Western Conference. And should Sixers fans start to worry? I mean, this is the first time the Sixers showed flaws this season. We know they haven't really showed anything to worry about this whole season. Last week on this episode, we were praising about how their bench was playing. And now this week, they're getting outscored 26 in the Portland game, 29 in the Suns game, and 25 in the Jazz game. So should Sixers fans really start to worry? I think we'll start with you, Tyler.
You know what? We've never really had this luxury of being at the top of the East this early in the season. So I really don't think there is a reason to worry necessarily, because you're almost in that spot where you can not coast, but you don't have to worry game by game. I mean, the Utah Jazz 23-5 right now. They could go horrific for the rest of the season. They're still going to get a playoff bid. So looking at that kind of aspect of it, it's good. And the other factor I'll say is the 3 teams combined were 53-24. So they weren't scrubs they were going to. It was all on the road. A West Coast trip are always difficult. And the only thing you really got to look at is the defensive woes. I mean, we're going to get into how ecstatic we are to actually see Simmons scoring the ball. He had a 42-point night in that last game. But he comes out of the game with a -5 and a plus-minus, and a -11 in plus-minus was Tobias Harris, who dropped over 30. So just the defensive woes and giving up that amount of points, 124 points combined in these 3 games, is massive. And you just can't really overcome that even with an electric offense like the Sixers have.
Yeah, I think another reason to be worried is you have a game like the Jazz where you're playing. I think all Sixers fans were ecstatic to see that game. You have a number 1 team in the West playing great. You have the Sixers and the number 1 in the East playing great. And then Doc Rivers says before the game that Joel Embiid's going to be healthy and ready to go. And then about 20 minutes prior to tip-off, he's a late scratch. I'm going to go here to you, Aiden, with this. Is there miscommunication on the Sixers front office with how stuff's being handled with the players, or what's going on with that?
I think part of it is just the fact that when you have a star player like Embiid, you don't want to sort of say how he's doing, how he's not doing, sort of tip off the media for one. For another, I think that it's just that Joel's a very competitive player, and he's going to want to play every game. So I think that Doc Rivers expects him to play every game, same way that Embiid expects to play every game. So when he doesn't, it's not only a shock to the fans, but I think it's also not surprising to Embiid, but I think Embiid really wants to play.
Yeah, I mean, also like Tyler said, those 3 teams with the combined record, like you said, those are 3 very good teams. And like we said, we're hard fans in Philly, so obviously every loss that we get, we're going to be hard about it. But like we said, the Sixers are still 18-10 on the season. They're the number 1 seed in the conference yet. They're still a game ahead of the Nets. The Nets they're showing their woes also. I'm going to go to you, Will. Should the Sixers still be favorited as the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, or should they not?
I think so, as long as the entire lineup, not just the starters, stay healthy. It's obvious when one of the guys, the main guys out of Joel or Ben is out or Tobias is out, that the team takes a step back. And when the bench doesn't play well, they also take a step back. So I think that's part of the reason why they're on a 3-game losing streak out in the West that they just had. And I also believe that if Joel comes back healthy, he'll continue to play at MVP level, and I think they can stay in first place.
I think it's big for Embiid to come back healthy, and I also think, sorry to cut you off, it's also big that Shake Milton comes back healthy, because that's kind of been a under-the-radar kind of player that we've seen. His minutes were diminishing about 4 games ago before he stopped playing overall, and he's been that 3rd contributor. I mean, now, since this recent surge from Simmons, he's overpassed him for 3rd most in points behind Harris and Embiid. But getting that production off the bench usually, and just being able to kind of jumpstart and take off some of the pressure, because the bench has been good, the depth has been good, but when it comes down to Thibault and Firkin and players like that, they can't create their own offense on their own. And especially without any factors like Howard coming off the bench and said he has to start over Embiid. So it just, when it becomes a plug-and-play thing, they aren't at that level like the Lakers are, where if they need to move people up in like a hockey term, almost like up a line, they're not going to be able to do so.
Yeah, I think the thing for me that really stood out over, especially losing these past 3 games, and it was the bench. I mean, when you're getting outscored overall around 25 points a game, and they lost to the Portland Trailblazers by 4 points, the Suns by, I think, around like 8 points, and then even the Jazz without Embiid, they lost by 11 points. So if you cut that bench differential to like around 10 points and at least keep it close and respectable, I say we at least win 2 out of 3 of those games. I mean, maybe not the Jazz because Jordan Clarkson decided to go off for 45 points, career high, I guess, and wanted to make Ben Simmons' night quiet. But I just want to go to next. Like you said earlier, Ben Simmons had a career night, 42 points. The past 3 games, I think the past 5 games actually, he's averaged 18-plus points. I mean, as Sixers fans, that was one of our main excuses for him. Why we wanted to trade him was he couldn't score. He showed no offensive development. I mean, the other night, he looked like a complete beast out there. Tyler, I mean, you got to be happy with how Ben Simmons is playing right now, right?
Oh, massive. I mean, Doc Rivers hit the head on the nail when he was saying that he loved the matchup that he was in, and he kind of forced the ball through him. It's something that we should see a lot more. I mean, the biggest factor I see from him, 42 points is obviously capable of, but the 2 factors were 26 field goal attempts, where he usually averages 15, so he has 11-point increase. And the other thing, 12 for 13 from the free throw line. He's not a shooter, so that's obviously massive to see from him, but just to see the ball in his hands and him being not just a facilitator throughout the night, even though he had 9 assists and was just 1 away from getting the triple-double, it's massive just to see him actually put the team on his back like he used to back in the days without Embiid.
Aiden, I want to go to you next. Like I said earlier, when James Harden was on the trade block, all Sixers fans, not all of them, but a decent amount were calling for Ben Simmons to get traded. Trade him for that next superstar to pair with Embiid. Do you think these past games have shown that Ben Simmons can be that number 2 guy on a championship team? Or do you think we should still look at the trade block? Because especially trade deadline's coming up near, and you may have guys like Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine in play. So would you trade a guy like Ben Simmons for a guy like Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine?
At this point, I would say absolutely not. Simmons has clearly proven that he can be the player that the Sixers expect him to be when they took him first overall. But not only that, it's the fact that he is so dominant, not only scoring, but his passing is just something that is not shown by many other NBA superstars. So the fact that he's now scoring along with his assists and rebounds, that's something that I don't think the Sixers can be willing to give up.
And Will, I want to go to you finally. If you had to rank Tobias, Joel Embiid, and Ben Simmons for most important from 1 to 3, who would you rank it from?
I would go Joel 1, Ben 2, and Tobias 3. Because Joel and Ben both bring the aspect of lockdown defense in addition to the scoring. And Ben scored 42 points. I'm going to keep saying it. Imagine if he had a jump shot. 42 points with a jump shot, and he's aggressive like that going to the rim, he could put up 60.
And I was just going to say that because, like, you look at the most productivity that he has in the paint is effective field goal percentage is similar to his just overall field goal percentage because he doesn't get that boost. Is it almost somewhere worth it where you take, like Aiden said, like the loss of his flashy passing and just the effectiveness that he has facilitating the ball for someone that could shoot a higher clip? Because in 3-point effective ratings, they're still at the bottom barrel, even though Danny Green and Steph Curry were here to make those differences.
And one more thing just to wrap the Sixers up real quick. We were talking about last week that Seth Curry would be the first member of the 50-50-100 club. Sadly, against the Phoenix Suns, more sad news for the Sixers. He went 3 for 4 from free throws. So that kills that stat. But we're going to go to a quick break real quick, and after that, we're going to talk some Flyers.
I was going to ask. I didn't know if he still had it or not.
Or
Hey, you're not you when you don't watch LaSalle TV. Here, let me show you.
Have much more left, but the only reason why now for everyone else it's a one-year rental.
SportsTalk Philadelphia here on the South TV. I'm your host, all that and much more.
Feel better now?
Better. You're not you when you're not watching LaSalle TV. To stay up to date, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
So we all know the Flyers season has still been on halt due to COVID-19, sadly. They're up to four games now, and I believe since last episode we now have 7 Flyers on the COVID-19 protocol. Now, that doesn't mean all 7 of those Flyers have COVID. That just means that 7 of those guys were in contact or close contact, and maybe some of them do have COVID. We have the list. We have Travis Konechny, Oscar Lindblom, Lofton, Morgan Frost, Voracek, Drew, and Braun. I mean, that's a heavy list of key players on the Flyers. I mean, looking forward to the season and when they finally hopefully resume. I mean, what do we expect out of the Flyers? I'm going to start with you, Tyler. Like, what do we expect out of this team? They haven't had their legs under them in a little bit, so.
And that's the biggest factor is who, when we get more information, because it's so hard for us to tell who unfortunately is suffering symptoms from this or who is just in close contact, because we've seen from countless sports, we've seen from countless examples that these players, when they come back, even though we are used to them at an athletic excellence, when they come back and they were suffering from this disease, it affects them throughout the whole season. And obviously the number one that we're holding our breath about is Oscar Lindblom, obviously just coming off of his cancer treatment not too long ago. So hopefully, hopefully are all 7 of these players to remain healthy and come back to form. But just going from a hockey standpoint, it's also very difficult just to go in a hotel for the past couple of weeks or wherever they're stationing right now, and to be able to go back to gameplay. There's nothing that you can emulate like getting on the ice every day. So just trying to get the rust off when they get back will be huge.
Yeah, I did see that. At least they're still having that team chemistry part taking place. I mean, all the players are saying, the captains are saying that the team group chats are still blowing up. They're still keeping in communication with each other. So that's one of the main key things that you want, because especially hockey is such a team chemistry sport. You want to keep that chemistry together, and especially when you can't be around with your team for about up to 2 weeks, that can be a very difficult thing. Shane, I want to go to you. How do you expect the Flyer season to resume, especially against the Bruins? Apparently, their game's supposed to resume on Sunday against the Bruins, and we all know that we've had a lot of struggles against the Bruins this year. So, Shane.
Yeah, well, actually, they're supposed to resume tomorrow night against the Rangers. But, on Sunday, they're going to be missing a couple of their key players. But against the Bruins, who they have had trouble with this season, and they're 0-4 against the Bruins. But earlier today, when they interviewed with Kevin Hayes, he said it's just basically a next guy up mentality, which they certainly do have with all the depth they have. And also, actually, they will be missing Claude Giroux for a little while because he was actually tested positive for the virus. But all the other players on the list right now, their tests came back today and they were tested negative.
Yeah, Claude Giroux, if you look at that, one of the best players, especially one of the best offensive players we have on our team. I'm going to go to you, Aiden. With an extension missed period of time with Claude Giroux, does this team have to worry? And who's going to step up and fill those shoes? Because we all know how great of a player Claude Giroux is.
Yeah, I think that the Flyers definitely have some concerns coming up. I think the major part that hasn't been mentioned yet, though, is the fact that most of these games that have gotten canceled are getting pushed back to later in the season. At that point, all these players are going to be pretty tired. So you're not only going to have to deal with playing more games later, you also have to deal with worried about the playoff push coming up at that point. So I think the Flyers definitely have some concerns, not only in the short term, but the long term.
And like Shane said, the Flyers are going to resume their season tomorrow night, not Sunday, like I said. Sunday, they're actually going to play, I think, the NHL starting Lake Tahoe. That's going to be the Flyers' first game there. That's going to be a very cool, interesting first game back for the Flyers, or not, second game back for the Flyers. It's going to be very exciting to watch for fans. We're going to transition to some Phillies talk now. Some good news there, actually. Instead of the Sixers and Flyers, we have pitchers and catchers reported Wednesday. Some great news, and I'm going to start with you, Tyler. We know we got a bunch of key bullpen additions. Looks a little different from last year, but we still have some familiar faces. Are you more worried about the bullpen going into this year, or are you more worried about the starting five? Because I'm more worried about the starting five this year, because if you look at it, you have Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, but after that, I see a bunch of question marks, so leave it up to you.
No, yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I personally do worry about the bullpen just because of coming off the woes of last season like we did. And getting a guy like Archie Bradley to come in there and be a veteran force and to kind of take over the role that David Robertson was supposed to be, and unfortunately couldn't, even though he has a higher caliber and ceiling than Archie Bradley would. It's huge, and it's just also to see some of the guys coming back, like, what are you going to get from your bottom tier guys, like your Victor Arenas, from your, hopefully, if Sir Anthony Dominguez can see the field this season, like, what were you going to see from these guys? So just getting the depth front to back in this bullpen is going to be huge, especially as the MLB overall just tends towards the bullpen nowadays.
Yeah, personally, I'm going to be very excited to see what Zach Eflin does this year, because he was one of the players that we got, I think, from I think it was a Cole Hamels trade when we were trading a bunch of our players away, and he was one of the main prospects that we got for him. And towards the end of the last year, he showed that he could be a solid number 3 guy. And for me, if the Phillies want to be contenders, they're going to need players like Zach Eflin to step up and pitch like a number 3 guy, so they have that insurance so they can play better. Aiden, I want to go to you. If you had to pick one Phillies player this year, whether it was looking at Scott Kingery, maybe Zach Eflin, any younger guy, any guy to step up this season that you believe that would make the Phillies contenders more than they are now?
Yeah, I definitely think that one guy that I'm really looking at curiously is definitely Kingery, but I'm also looking at Roman Quinn. Definitely our center fielders. It's a position that's a big question mark out of our position players. And I think that one of those guys definitely has to step up in the spring, but they also need to step up in the regular season as well.
How about you, Shane? Do you have a player that you have a big stepping up this year, big jump from last year?
Yeah, I actually think that it should be Rhys Hoskins. We seen last year, at least like maybe in the middle of August, is when he actually started to step up his play, especially at the plate. And we seen him get back to what he was when he first came up with the Phillies. But he eventually obviously got hurt and missed the rest of the season. But if they're going to make the playoffs, I think it's going to be Rhys Hoskins who has to step up.
Yeah, and the Phillies also have some more good news. And it seems like the Phillies are all good news today. We all, as fans, Jake Arrieta finally, he signs back with the Chicago Cubs, his former team that he won a World Series with. I mean, as a Philly fan, you have to be ecstatic. I mean, we paid that guy starting pitching money. Every time it seemed like every time he pitched, he got lit up or he was hurt. And then every time he got lit up, he'd blame it on his teammates and his infielders. And as a fan, that just rubbed me off the wrong way. Jake Arrieta, I was never a fan of him. Tyler, I'm going to go to you. And how excited are you to get Arrieta out of here?
I mean, it's huge. He just never really meshed with the Philadelphia culture, of course. But I want to go back quickly because I think, once again, I hate to put a negative spin on the Phillies, but the way that they managed him I thought was a little bit suspect. So going from 2014 to 2016, when Jake Arrieta received Cy Young votes in 2015, won the Cy Young, he threw a lot of separate pitches. His highest pitch percentage was his sinker at 33%. And because of that, he had a 181 average and a 472 slugging off that pitch. Once he gets to Philadelphia, they see those positive numbers on the sinker, and I don't know if it was him, I don't know if it was just because he lost the sinker, or I assume it was the coaching staff who kind of forced that down his throat more. He threw the sinker 67% of the time, so he doubled it, and because of that, he had a 402 average against it and an 894 slugging off that pitch. So I think that it was a little bit of mismanagement both ways, but as you said, it was also big that he just never really meshed and he was always blaming other people, and he has a pretty outgoing personality in a bad way.
And Aiden, I want to go to you with this question. Is Jake Arrieta one of the worst free agent signings that the Phillies have in recent memory? I mean, it's got to be one of the biggest ones that I think of in recent memory.
Yeah, I really don't even think it's close. When we signed him, you have to remember, that was the year before we signed Harper. So we were expecting Arrieta to really be the guy that led us to our first playoff berth since 2011. Not only was he not that guy, he was one of the reasons why the Phillies haven't made the playoffs since we got him. I mean, his ERA was close to 5 every year that he played. Like you guys said, he was either hurt or inconsistent. So yeah, I definitely think that he is one of the worst free agents of recent memory for the Phillies.
I think this is a big year for the Phillies because this is Bryce Harper's 3rd season as a Philly. Obviously, you paid him top 5 player money. So when you pay a player top 5 money, you hope that you can build a team around him that can go to the playoffs, at least the playoffs, and hopefully the World Series. I mean, we were even saying last year, I mean, even with the expanded playoffs that they had last year, adding teams, and it was very disappointing to see the Phillies that they still couldn't make it, even with a new general manager. So I'm going to go to you, Shane, for this one. Do you think the Phillies make the playoffs this year, or do you believe they're contenders? I don't think we can call them contenders yet because obviously they haven't made the playoffs in the past, 9 or 5, 6 years. So
Yeah. I think they're probably going to be most likely a wild card team this year. They have gotten a little bit better, and obviously with the bullpen, with signing Archie Bradley. But I still think, like you said earlier, they're starting pitching after Nola and Wheeler. It's a little iffy, but I mean, like with Eflin, if he can be their good 3rd starter for them, I think they could be a wild card team this year.
yeah, and it seems like out of all the teams in the Phillies division, they were the ones that did the least amount of moves. I mean, the Mets, they got Francisco Lindor. I mean, the Nationals even got better. I mean, all the teams, Marlins, they got a lot of young talent. I mean, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Phillies fare out this season. But we're going to jump into Fast Five now. It's everyone's favorite. We're going to go to the first one. We're going to go This Week in Baseball with Tyler Small, a new little gig with you.
Yeah, so for This Week in Baseball, not a ton happened. I guess the biggest news will be Justin Turner going back to the Dodgers. And I hate to talk about the Dodgers the first 2 weeks, but they're clearly the best team in baseball. And it's the main reason is they had a trade with the A's, actually, besides getting back their 3rd baseman. And they gave away Kelenic because they have so much bullpen depth. So it's good to see the A's picking up guys like him, Sergio Romo, Yusmeri Petit, so kind of some older names. But they got a guy named Noose, and he is supposed to be the next Max Muncy for this team, which is kind of strange because it could be Turner, it could be Max Muncy. All these guys have had such resurgent careers with the Dodgers, and I think it's such an underrated part of their system that they have given guys second life and have given them these flourishing careers, even though people like Justin Turner were never supposed to be anyone. So huge signing for the Dodgers.
Yeah, the next question we're going to go to is, as we all saw, J.J. Watt, Hall of Famer, going to be all-time Pro Bowler, defensive end, was released from the dumpster fire Texans. As we all know, they're even worse than the Eagles over there. Mm-hmm. But we're asking, what type of team do we think he's going to sign with, and with who? And I'm going to answer this one. I think he's going to sign with a contender, obviously, because J.J. Watt is towards the end time of his career. Obviously, he wants to add a Super Bowl to his resume, already a great resume. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he signs with the Steelers, should have been Defensive Player of the Year, his brother T.J. Watt, or will he sign with the Arizona Cardinals and team back up with DeAndre Hopkins and finished off what they started. So it's going to be very interesting to see where J.J. Watt goes because he's a great player, and whatever team he goes to, that defensive line is going to get amped up. Next question is, Anthony Davis, NBA fans, we saw that he re-aggravated his Achilles injury. Very sad thing to see. Does this hurt the Lakers' chance of repeating? Tyler, I'm going to go to you with this one.
Oh, immensely. I mean, repeating in sports is the number one most difficult thing that you could possibly do as a team. So obviously they already have that obstacle to come over. But they're at that point, like I said earlier, that the regular season doesn't matter to them. It just matters if he is bound for 4 to 6 weeks, take 8 weeks to get him back because these games really don't matter. So being able to get him back will be huge, but they're still going to be able to win a ton of games in between because of all the acquisitions. Like we talked about the Dodgers adding after they were trying to repeat. The Lakers did it even more with Dennis Schroeder, with Montrezl Harrell even, people like that. They're huge names that just came to this team and are taking minuscule roles but have the immense capabilities to step up and take a starting role if they have to.
Yeah, that's a very good point because if you do look at the Lakers last year, the depth they have is not even near what they have now. Like you said, Dennis Schroeder edition. You got Montrezl Harrell, former Sixth Man of the Year on Clippers, and he's a great center. So adding those pieces in, I think you're right. It's probably going to be – I'd be more worried about the Lakers if this was last year and this was happening than rather this year. But as we all know, it's very hard to repeat in today's day and age in sports, as we saw with the Chiefs. They had such a talented team, and they still couldn't even do it. Next question I'm going to go to, if the NBA season ended today, finals matchup predictions. Shane, I'm going to go to you with this one.
I'm going to say the Sixers and Lakers, two of the best teams in the league, and you get a LeBron James and Joel Embiid matchup against each other.
Aiden, how about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with the Sixers, but I think the Jazz, just at this point, with Anthony Davis being hurt, I think that definitely throws in a question mark with the Lakers. And if he gets hurt again, I think the Jazz will make it to the finals.
And Tyler, I'm gonna have you answer this one too. You have a finals matchup prediction yet? I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the NBA right now.
I think it's huge. The Nets have been really flourishing ever since James Harden kind of took that point guard role. But I'm still going to go against that take because of the usage percentage thing. I can't just go against myself like that. So I think the Sixers are going to represent the East, of course, Bearing. And the only reason I go against the Jazz is just I need to see them do it in the playoffs. Anyone can play in the regular season. They've played phenomenally, and they blew that game against the Nets last night. But once you look at it, the Lakers, LeBron James could carry a team like the 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers to the finals. He's going to be fine without Anthony Davis, even if he's out for the rest of the season. Obviously, knock on wood.
And our final question we're going to go to is, who wins the NFC East next year? I mean, obviously, we got a lot of time. We got free agents yet to sign to teams. We got a lot of trades that happen yet. But just looking at what has transpired yet from this past NFL season is, who do you guys have as your NFC East winner? Aiden, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with Washington winning the division again. They had, even though they struggled with inconsistent quarterback play, they still had a very good young defense. Led by Rookie of the Year Chase Young. So I definitely think that Washington, once they can get a good quarterback, better offensive consistency, they'll be not only contenders for the NFC East, but I think that coming up, they'll definitely be contenders for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it hurts me to say this, but I'm going to have to go with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, just looking at their offensive weapons, they have CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott. They have all those guys, especially locked up under contract or even on a rookie contract. So you have offensive weapons like that, and then obviously they have the Dak Prescott situation where they don't know whether they're going to sign him, whether he's going to sign with someone else. But if they get Dak Prescott, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be a threat in the NFL next year. I want to thank everyone for watching this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. It was great to talk about the Sixers, Flyers, and the Phillies. Hopefully we can get the Sports for Flyers resumed back soon. But always give us a follow on Sports Talk LTV on Twitter. And thanks again for watching. This is Cale Flieger here again, and have a good rest of the day.